All right, so we're in video 2. So what are we going to talk about? So the rest of the videos are about the parts of the cell. The parts of the cell and what do they do. And so the things I talk about in the videos, those are the things you need to focus on for the exam. And of course, as you're doing your homework, you should be doing your homework and looking at the video. All right, so here's a cell, right? It's alive, okay? It interacts with its environment. How does it do it? With its membrane, right? The cell membrane. So the cell membrane is an important part of the cell, and we spend a lot of time on the cell membrane, and you're like, why? Why do we do that? Because many things are going on and affect the cell, and those things are happening at the cell membrane. Okay, so here's the membrane. It says they're gatekeepers. What? Why is there this picture? Okay, so if you look, here's this entrance, and here are the guards, right? They're guarding what can go into and out of the building. The cell membrane does the same thing. The cell membrane has openings, and it's selective as to what can go into and out of the cell. So they're the gatekeepers, okay? And it's called a semi-permeable membrane. Semi means like half. Permeable, right? So it's not permeable completely. It lets certain things in, but not other things. So it's almost like these guards. Okay, so here, for example, this guy's trying to get through and there's a gate, right? So plasma membranes are gatekeepers. So what's their function? So here's the cell, here's the inside of the cell, here's the outside of the cell. There are proteins on the cell membrane. There are molecules on the cell membrane that helps it with recognizing, what's this? Do we want to get it in or not? Okay. So here, this is an important little side note, right? Function. So if this is a large picture, what are the functions of the cell? Cell membrane, excuse me. Holds contents of the cell in place. Yes. Okay, without a cell membrane, there would be no cell, right? So you have this thing, and the membrane is what keeps it together, right? So holds contents of the cell membrane. Takes in food and nutrients. So via these almost like doorways, or almost like they're called channels, right? So that makes sense. Like sugars and proteins can go in, okay? Aids in building and exporting molecules. So when the cell makes stuff, things can go out of the cell through the cell membrane. Sometimes it's small enough it could go right through here. Sometimes it's too big and it needs a transport molecule. Allows interactions with the environment and neighboring cells. So how do cells know? Okay, hey dude, hey your next door neighbor, do we want to pass things along? Should we grow now? Should we stop growing? Should we make more proteins? What should we do, right? So there are these little molecules on the cell membrane that helps with communication. So this slide gives you an overview of the function of the cell membrane. All right, so here it is again, right, function. Now getting into the anatomy. What's the cell membrane made of? Okay, if you remember, water was a really important molecule, right? But if you remember, water was a really good solvent. It dissolves stuff. So for example, if you had a leak in your house and water got out, water dissolves stuff. So if we have water on the inside of the cell, and if we have water on the outside of the cell, why doesn't the water just dissolve the cell? Okay, well, because of the membrane and what the membrane's made of. It's called a phospholipid bilayer. Lipid, what are lipids? Fats, yeah? Fats. Do fats and water mix? Do you know that? Do they? No, they don't. Okay. Imagine if you had a bottle of salad dressing and the oil's on the top and the water and the stuff's on the bottom. You shake, 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 and the little droplets go in, but they don't actually mix. And if you left the bottle standing, the oil goes to the top, right? So oil and water don't mix. And this is a good thing for the cell because these lipids, hydrophobic tails, these are the lipids, okay? Hydro means water, phobic means fearing. So these tails right here, right, they don't like water. Okay, and there's some here and there's some here. Phospholipid, those are the lipid tails. Phosphate, that's the phosphate head. The phosphate heads are here. The lipid tails are here. Bilayer, what does bi mean? Two, right? Layer. So if you look, here is one phospholipid bilayer. Here's another phospholipid bilayer. So all cell membranes have a phospholipid bilayer, 2 layers, and it's made out of phospholipids. Now, the phosphate heads do okay with water, so they're called hydrophilic. Philos means to love or loving. Hydro is water. So hydrophilic, they like water. They're okay with water. Phobic means, like, think of phobia. I'm phobic. I'm, arachnophobic. I'm afraid of spiders or whatever it is. So phobia means fearing. So these are water fearing, and they're right here, so they don't mix well with water, which is perfect. If you're in an aquatic environment, in a water environment, these tails are going to keep the water from dissolving the cell. So even though the internal environment, intracellular fluid, watery fluid inside the cell, extracellular, extra means outside, extracellular fluid, water there, and it doesn't dissolve the cell because of the lipid tails, okay? Now, phospholipid bilayer, that's not all there are in the cell membrane. There are these purple things. The purple things are proteins, okay? So this is an important slide, shows the different types of proteins and the functions. So I do want you to know that. It says there are 4 primary types of membrane proteins, each which performs a different function. So receptor proteins, recognition proteins, transport proteins, membrane enzymes. So with the previous slide, we talked about transport proteins, like those doorways. Will transport stuff into the cell or out of the cell. Provides a passageway for molecules to travel into or out of the cell, right? So transport proteins, okay? So sugars, proteins, amino acids can go through here. Recognition proteins, that was another thing we talked from the previous slide. So how do cells recognize other cells? Well, these proteins. This means nothing to you right now, but it'll mean something in just a second. For example, if you've ever heard of someone getting an organ transplant, and it's like, oh, why can't you just take an organ from someone else and put it in someone else's body? Because the cells will recognize the other cells, and if they are foreign, the cells will protect themselves, right? That's why we have an immune system. Our immune system protects us from foreign invaders, so things coming in and attacking us. Now, how is the immune system going to know? Oh, these are our cells, don't attack. Oh, these are foreign cells, attack. Well, the recognition proteins are involved in that. Receptor proteins. Remember we said cells communicate with other cells? And you've all heard of hormones. So this could be a hormone. It travels in the blood, goes to a cell, and tells a cell what to do. Like grow now, or stop growing, or whatever it wants it to do. Like there's what's called growth hormone. That's why I use this example. So here, the protein on the cell membrane will bind with a hormone and cause some changes. So it says binds to external chemicals in order to regulate process within the cell. So really neat. I mean, come on, you're made out of trillions of cells and this stuff's happening. You don't even know it's happening, and it's happening on this subconscious level, right? And if it doesn't happen, you're gonna know there's a problem, okay? Cellular communication, that's one of some of the most common problems that people might have, okay? If you have a headache and you take aspirin or you take ibuprofen, how's it working? It's working on the cellular level, specifically on the membrane level. Haha, okay? Another thing here, carbohydrate chains provide a fingerprint for the cell, so it's recognized by other cells. So these carbohydrates, we've heard that word before, and the recognition proteins, again, for cells to recognize other cells. Cholesterol, that helps with membrane flexibility. You hear about cholesterol, and people are like, cholesterol's so horrible, but it's not. Okay, it's just when there's too much, that's when it is. Membrane enzymes, reactions, cellular reactions can happen there. So I will be putting some videos of cells doing their thing, and you need to watch them because they're cool. You're like, what? This is happening on the microscopic level? Yes, it is. So sometimes the plasma membrane is called fluid mosaic. Mosaic, you know, like you have all the little tiles and they're like a mosaic. And that it's called that because these proteins are like little tiles, right? Fluid, the reason it's called fluid, the membrane can move, okay? And that's where the video is going to be so important to see, right? You could see the membrane moving. You could see a white blood cell, the video I'm going to show you, a white blood cell going after a bacterium. How does it do that? Well, with a membrane. All right. All right. So here it talks about what if there are problems with the membrane. So you've all heard of cystic fibrosis. It's a disease that has an issue with the cell membranes. And it says, and what happens, it says the thick, sticky mucus produced by someone with cystic fibrosis collects in the lungs, impairing lung function, increasing the risk of bacterial infection. So these poor people, right? This person's massaging this person to get that thick mucus out, or they have to get on a machine, right, to help get that mucus out. And the problem is with cell membranes and proteins not doing their job right. Beta blockers, reducing anxiety. A lot of molecules, a lot of pharmaceuticals, right, are working on the cell membrane. So if someone's really nervous and, you know, or it has anxiety, like how do the medicines work? So for example, they show someone, they're giving a presentation, they're really nervous, the adrenal glands, they release adrenaline that causes the sweating, right? Look at, he's sweating, right? And all of that. But let's say someone has anxiety and they're taking these what are called beta blockers. Here's the phospholipid bilayer. Here are those receptor proteins. What the beta blockers do is they bind with the receptor protein, blocking the adrenaline from affecting the cell. And adrenaline is what gives us that, you know, nervous feeling, or you hear about people like being adrenaline junkies. They love that, you know. For example, if you get scared, you know, going on a roller coaster ride, etc., it's hormones that are being released by the adrenal glands that affect your cells, affect your heart, affect your muscles, right? Fight or flight. Are we going to get going? Sweating, right? You're like ready to go, affects your skin, etc., etc. So these hormones that float in the blood will get to their target organs are made out of cells, then these proteins, the hormone will bind with the protein and trigger change in the cell. So if you take a beta blocker, right, this medication binds with the receptor proteins and blocks the adrenaline from causing that effect. So for people with anxiety, right, this can calm them down, okay? So it says by binding to adrenaline receptors, beta blockers reduce anxiety symptoms. So some people really need this, okay, depending on what's going on with their life at that point in time. So normal cell functioning can be disrupted when cell membranes, particularly the proteins embedded with them, do not function properly. So I love this book because it has these practical applications and shows you, you know, why do we care about these things? Do these things actually impact your life? Yes, they do. Okay. Oh, here, membrane surface has fingerprint that identifies a cell. So those recognition proteins, so they show, and this is again, beautiful slide because you've heard of this stuff and it's like, oh, we're learning about it in biology, right? So here, for example, let's say this person needs a liver transplant and these are the proteins on their cell membrane. And let's say here's a donor liver and these are the proteins. And if you look, this protein, the color, the purple is different than this blue. Well, guess what? The immune system will recognize this as foreign and will attack it. And so if you've ever heard of like organ rejection, right? That would be an example. So they try to match, right, the donor and the recipient as much as possible. And then for the most likely, the person still has to take anti-rejection drugs. So every cell in your body has a fingerprint, right, made from a variety of molecules on the outside surface of the cell membrane. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop here and then talk about movement through the cell membrane.